Okay, we're good.
Go ahead, Russ, you're on.
Me?
I think it's.
I'm sorry, Steve. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
Well, I'm not going to say much, which is unusual, as this group knows. This is a panel group that I saw a version of this at VoucherCon a couple of years ago, and it was just sensational. Janet, you're moderating the program on cybercrime, so I'm going to turn it over to you to handle the introduction of the panelists and the discussion. And thanks to Russ. Thanks to Russ for putting all of this together, because it's a lot of hard work going into putting this together, and he's responsible for that.
So yeah, so welcome. This is a pretty interesting program, and so timely given all that we're reading in the news about, you know, cyber attacks, cybercrime, and as some of those of you who are on this call before we got you know, this part up and running, you see that we're not always the swiftest on technology, but we're learning, and that's one of the reasons we have panels like this. How can we incorporate you know, writing about, you know, cyber issues intelligently in our writing, and protect ourselves in real life? Our panel is well, Russ Eberhart. He writes as Ross Carley. His fifth novel is The Three-Legged Assassin, and it just came out. And it features a Middle Eastern veteran and a computer hacker who becomes an assassin to make ends meet. I heard him talking about this book early on, and I'm anxious to read it myself. Judy Copek is part of the panel. She was born in Montana, raised in Colorado, educated in Texas, has lived in Chicago, and now is in Boston. So she's sampled a part of all of the country. She's been an information systems nerd, and writes about technology's humor and the quirkiness, along with some of the scarier aspects. She's a member of the Mystery Writers of America, Sisters in Crime, and the Short Mystery Fiction Society. Steve Loden is the Senior Director of IAM and Cybersecurity Operations in Corporate Security at Sallie Mae. He's been focused on managing identity, access management, perimeter security, endpoint protection, application security, threat intelligence to reduce risk. He's widely published in this field, and he has a master's degree in computer science from Purdue, where he was a member of the Coast Sirius program. And maybe he can tell us a little bit about what that is, because I don't know. Doyle Groves is a staff data scientist at one of the largest providers of corporate information security. And there, he really studies the evolving threat landscape, communication behavior of malware in the wild, and the ongoing efficacy of detection machinery. He serves two labs at Indiana. He's a data specialist and a teaching assistant at Indiana University, where they apply text mining research to find signals in social media data to support public health and crisis management. To kind of get started, I'm going to ask each of our panelists to talk a little bit about their background, what they're doing in the field, and how they think that it can apply to writing. So I was going to say your name comes up as Hans Copek, but Judy, I was going to start with you.
Okay, well, my background was mostly in mainframe and mid-range computers, programming as systems analyst, you know, project lead, and that sort of thing. I also worked on a system that did online catalog and that sort of thing, clothing, selling clothing. So that was very much retail. And I've been retired for some years. I wrote 4 books about technology, and each time I took a particular aspect of technology, like data mining or hackers, whatever, and kind of concentrated on that. I'm not super technical, and since I've left the field, I've kind of left a lot of stuff behind. My current book is set in Wheat Harvest in Kansas. So you can imagine in 1953, there was no technology, and it's kind of a relief to get away from that. But on the other hand, I miss it. So that's my story.
Steve Loden.
Good afternoon. I'm Steve Lodin. I work at Sallie Mae. I'm trying to protect hundreds of millions of identities from hackers. I grew up in the field studying security at Purdue University under Professor Gene Spafford. He was one of the pioneers in the field with respect to attacks. We've grown up quite a bit in the years protecting, and that's really my job right now. We use colors to talk about that. It's either white hat, black hat, gray hat, or in my case, I'm on the blue team. I used to be on the red team. Red team is attackers, blue team is protectors. So I'm on the blue team trying to protect my company from those hackers. Russia right now, as you guys are all aware of, is the big talk of the day. I'll reserve some time later to talk about Russia.
Doyle.
Hi, everybody. I'm Doyle, and I'm a data geek who has come into security kind of late in life. I've done several other things with a common thread of just large data representations that paint a picture about something. So the recent several years have been in cybersecurity related stuff. I work for Proofpoint, which is one of the largest protectors of corporate email and corporate assets in a lot of ways. I think Steve might even be a customer of ours, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, the day-to-day work there is watching, you heard, watching malware communication on the ground. Right now, just to bring it right to the present and right to what's very interesting and current is what's happening on the other side of the world has a cyber element to it too. And Russ will probably outline the 5 phases, the 5 fronts of conflict that this war is uniquely about. And one of those is cyber. This is coming to the forefront as a tool in that toolbox. So to watch actual malware communicate as it's installed on the ground from place to place, from country to country, that process throws off lots of data, and to piece that together into a picture of who's talking to who, about what, who's moving stuff between, there's cybercrime in corporate settings already, but this extra aspect of international conflict management has whole new layers of people using stuff. There are nation state actors who are doing stuff to each other now that is also unprecedented. And there's just a lot of new things to learn. Again, my perspective is from the data side, but watching this tools, techniques, and practices of people build over time, it's that's what I'm here to help untangle and paint pictures for other real threat researchers to then interpret results and decide what our actions are, how we detect stuff, just all that kind of a stack. So that's a brief run through, and we'll revisit all those, I'm sure, here today.
Thanks. Russ, can you talk a little bit about how you kind of put this into your stories?
Sure. Well, part of the main reason I put it in my stories are Doyle and Steve. We have a little group we unofficially call the Cyber Cabal, and we meet periodically, and they give me ideas that I never had thought of, and they also sort of keep me on the straight and narrow, what is feasible, what isn't. My background going way back is military intelligence, and evolved. I've done some work with Doyle. Right now, I'm a consultant to an aerospace company in artificial intelligence and machine learning. And I think Doyle mentioned, in the old days, we had a 3-domain battlefield, if you will. We had air, land, and sea. And now we have a 5-domain battlefield, and that's air, land, sea, cyber, and space. And the thing is that all of those things weave together, particularly if you look, as we're looking at artificial intelligence applications in the military, space gets woven in with everything else. I have had fun folding in cyber attacks, cybercrime, and so on into my books. And there are some amazing things that are sort of almost routine now out there in that world. And I have one I'm going to talk about if I have time for a couple of minutes, but let's move along. Oh, I want to hype. This is Judy. Judy's first book is called.
Oh, no, not the first, the fourth.
Pardon me, the fourth book. First one I read, and it's called Murder in the North Woods, and it is a great story of cyber skullduggery. I guess you got cyber skullduggery.
Thank you.
Well, I think the elephant in the room is pretty much what's going on with cyber warfare in the Russia-Ukraine area. Especially Doyle and Steve, can you guys kind of talk to us a little bit more about what the implications of that are for not only that environment, but kind of the rest of us? Could you guys get into that a little bit, please? Either one. You guys are kind of I think that are resident experts on that. And since it's so topical, if you could share a little bit, please.
I'll go ahead and start that off. So I work in financial services. It's probably not as critical in infrastructure as gas, electric, but financial services are the mechanism that the US is using against Russia to try and coordinate and corral them into stopping the war. So our regulators are definitely concerned about whether or not there will be an impact in the US financial services area. We have an official threat intelligence sharing organization. The acronym is FSISAC. So all big banks, all medium-sized banks, about 5,000 of us globally, get together and talk about attacks. What are we seeing? How is it going to affect us? Is it spilling over? And it's a bi-directional share. My team contributes new attacks that we see to share with the other banks, and then we absorb information and put that, what's called indicators of compromise, into our systems to detect if attacks are happening. Certainly with Russia, there's not many new attacks. There's a couple. I think Doyle may be able to give us some insight on that. But to protect yourself as a company, your basic hygiene is going to help. Make sure you have multi-factor authentication turned on. Make sure you're patching your systems. Do email and web security in your communications, and put endpoint protection on. That's a good prevention, basic. Everybody should be doing that. On the detection side, make sure you're logging everything so that you can see what's going on, and then have people or systems to look for anomalous behavior. We are a US only company, so we already block traffic coming from Russia and Ukraine by default, in addition to North Korea, Indonesia, just all the bad guys, Iran, Iraq. The problem that we have is that most of our attackers seem to come from the US, and that's where our customer base is. So distinguishing between an attacker and a good guy sometimes is a little challenging for us. But as a bank, I think one of the biggest things we're concerned about is this spillover attacks that Russia has done in the past that have spilled over. The prime example is the attack called NotPetya. And that basically took down the Maersk shipping company, a FedEx subsidiary, also Merck Pharmaceuticals. Those companies had hundreds of millions of dollars of damage related to Russia attacking Ukraine. Again, we're not really getting attacked, but we're definitely on our toes and keeping our eyes peeled for any possible attacks. Doyle, what are you seeing on the vendor side coming out of Russia?
First of all, I'm glad you listed just the good hygiene tips for everybody, because it's important to understand what's happening in the world, but to start with your own just best practices to keep your own your own household network and things as safe as you can. But out from there, it depends on, you're then dependent on companies, and there's whole industries that are being targeted. I can't say for recent times as far as specific threat actors or malwares or things like that at the moment, other than to recognize that we've also seen some targeting of industries lately. For example, there is just the ransomware phenomenon that has taken whole categories of activity hostage for a while. Hospitals and state governments and certain kinds of targets. That's a thing that it comes and goes. It's still on the top of mind of people, but it's one where they do it for different reasons. Watching Russia be cut off from the world, they may become more dependent on dark sources of revenue. This is something that North Korea does. They hold ransomware campaigns to hold things for hostage, hospitals and other high value targets, to actually just get the revenue to keep the country moving. It's not even really maliciousness against a particular industry. They just go where the targets are most likely to respond to a ransom demand without, folding up their arms and not doing that. Another aspect that's not directly cyber, but I see also from my work at Indiana University, where we watch social media data stuff, there's a significant level of misinformation, disinformation going on now at the surface of what we see in social media. This is not malware chattering underground in ways that we can't see or feel. This is right there in your Facebook and Twitter feeds and other things like that. You're seeing this at the surface. I mention that because it is at the surface and very visible, but it's very hard to do something about. It's very hard to, you see a leak of bad information coming out, it's hard to just identify that and just plug it. It's an extension of an apparatus that is, again, part of nation state actors that want whole countries to behave a certain way, to watch an election divide a group of people, to watch a Brexit happen. These are all things that were kind of nudged over the edge by misinformation, disinformation from, again, state actors who have a long plan in mind that they are carrying out with various tools in the toolbox. That's one worth mentioning. In our work at IU, we try to look at that a little bit, but frankly, it is a little disheartening when it's a two-step process of identifying it first and then deciding what to do about it. And the what to do about it part is really hard, because individual people that you have tricked into doing something are the ones least likely to respond to deprogramming efforts, for lack of a better word. Somebody who's, and we all know these people who have been now hypnotized by something and they're behaving in new ways that they haven't before. That's a bad outcome, but that's the tool that's getting it done, is at the surface kind of misinformation campaigns on visible social media stuff. So that keeps me up at night as much as the purely cybery stuff flowing below the surface, if you will. So there's a couple of realms to consider.
A question, Doyle, on the misinformation stuff. That's, I think a lot of us are, that's the most understandable piece of this whole thing, because you can see it. I know I've gone through some Twitter feeds, especially on the Ukraine thing, and seen some things that really very obviously sound like Russia bots speaking to the issue. But it seems to me that it's been easiest to identify in retrospect, like kind of looking back at the 2016 election, or some of the things that happened in the 2020 election with some of the information circulating, or even with some of the information kind of going around, folks who believe that the election was stolen. You can go back and you can kind of see, and that's been traced back. But what can we do in real time? I know you're saying it's difficult, but are there steps that collectively institutions can take, or organizations like the big ones like Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or whatever? What can they do? And also, what can individuals do to kind of combat the misinformation?
Start with the individual perspective, because that's where there really is hope to do something. Back to doing your own good hygiene for having your home network protected by antivirus and other good behaviors that you've learned. Don't click on bad stuff. there is a let's see, the platforms is in a complicated state where they have technology. It starts right there on their platform. They can see it better than any of us. But as we've come to learn in the last several months with Facebook in particular, with the Facebook files that have come to light about what their motivations really are. Of course, they are a business and they are motivated toward engagement and optimization of engagement rather than putting resources into tamping down the difficulty and problematic stuff. Because it's very hard to do. It's expensive to do, but it's also something that is up until several months ago, they could say, well, we're trying and it's really hard, but it's come to light in these recent documents where they've been caught saying out loud, well, we have this choice and this choice, and this choice is about growth. And look at the growth story. Just since 2018, the last few years, they made a few choices then that said, these several hundred prominent figures, we will just let them say whatever they want because it's too hard to have a policy of exclusion and tamping and putting them in timeout for a little while and all those things. The evidence of that has now come to light that they did that on purpose because they knew that would grow the platform by leaps and bounds, all the while bringing along whatever difficulty that would be an outgrowth of that. That was not their concern. Platforms are not the answer. If anything, my hope is that there's an academic arm that is sort of a watchdog group. Watches that. Because the very first step to getting your arms around any of that is to see samples of real data all the time. Let Facebook share with researchers stuff. Twitter does a much better job about exactly that because it's a relatively open platform and you can see stuff. Researchers can look at that and researchers can say things like, it looks like there's a bot farm over here that sprang up and is doing this, and they can put a face on those campaigns as they happen. Facebook is much more opaque because it's organized in ways where it's small groups that are closed and not much is really happening at the big surface. But they have, again, just the structure that is one of or the attitude of not. Up until a year ago, they had some sharing with academic programs going on that they have since stopped doing. They've gotten worse about letting academics look over their shoulder, kind of characterize what's going on there, tell the rest of the world the nature of the speech. A lot of it we see, but there's a lot of very difficult stuff that happens down the weeds in terms of cybercrime and human trafficking and all kinds of stuff that there's an effort made in the US, but it's even less of an effort in most other countries of the world. So it starts with people doing the right thing on their own and just having good behavior, know what to look for and know what to spot. And if you are tempted to chime into a conversation, if it's Twitter, look at a few people talking. You'll see that there are little handles that don't have any followers and don't have any engagement themselves. It becomes easy to spot with some training when there's a conversation that is meant to cause you to be drawn into something and maybe buy into an ideology or take on a new idea that you wouldn't otherwise. It's happening in real time right before your eyes. Those accounts get discovered and removed. There's more waiting to take their place. It's an ongoing farming operation of cultivating new bots that are, and by the way, the bots are, sometimes they're pieces of software, sometimes they are actual humans sitting at a desk in another country that are doing stuff. So the behavior genuinely looks human because it is a human actually doing it at different times of day that staggers just like a human, makes it even harder to detect when it is an actual person, but it's a person with an agenda carrying out a job for a bad actor.
Couple things. I want to let folks know that if you have questions, put them in the chat and I'll funnel them to our speakers. And Bridget right now has a question, and I think you were kind of getting at it, but maybe address this more specifically is there a way to identify what truly is propaganda or what appears to be, cyber and, misinformation in the moment as it's coming? I mean, I know on that one Twitter feed, because first of all, I was kind of doing a little research to prepare for today, but I immediately recognized kind of the one Twitter thread and some of the people who were being very provocative on there as probably not people, but some bot somewhere trying to, stir things up. But for most of us, in the moment, how do you do it in the moment? And if all of you could weigh in on that as well.
I said a couple things just to wrap that up quickly. You've done that already just by kind of looking closely at who's participating, see what you can tell about those individual people. If they have low so-called engagement stats, again, they don't have any followers themselves. The account was started last week or last month, little things like that. But that takes a lot of work to just keep doing that due diligence all the time. I mean, that's a lot to ask of people. So just also recognize within yourself, if you're about to do something, just slow down a little bit. That throttling is what is, we're less under control of ourselves anymore with this this level of information exposure. So there's a few thoughts, please, others.
Yeah, Steve, Russ, Judy.
Yeah, on my side, I would just say if it sounds crazy and impractical, it probably is. So check yourself that way.
There are so many attempts to, either by telephone or on the internet or even Facebook, to try to get you to do something that you would normally not do. And we are very careful, but I know people who have fallen for all of these scams, and, you know, it's, and calling grandparents and saying, you know, in Mexico, I ran out of money, I broke my arm. And a lot of people fall for this, and it's really terrible. And, you know, it's upsetting, but no one seems to be able to do anything about it.
Yeah,
That's called a TOAD attack, the TOAD. I think it's telephone only attack domain. Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, if you've heard that term. That's so popular, it now has its own acronym and has its own industry channel of study. It is very effective, and you're right, it is rampant because it's the new thing that works, because it takes a purely software detection behavior on the computer thing and tells people to go call somebody and go continue a conversation with a human. Talk about feeling like you're doing something legitimate when you're not. It's fascinating how it has leapt realms back into old-fashioned telephone instructions. Go do this and call this and do this.
Yep. A scammer is a scammer. I actually had a person on my security team who kept his mother-in-law from going to buy Google Play cards for that exact purpose. It happens to everybody. It's not just a random instance. Those attacks. Nowadays, you get either a text message on your phone or an email saying, you just bought something. There's no links for you to click. You got to call somebody. And then that's the call center attack, as Doyle mentioned. And then they get you to click in, link in, enter your credentials, and then they swipe everything off of you from that. It starts with a phone call. So I don't know if you guys are like the rest of you are like me, but I don't answer the phone anymore. Unless it's in my contact list, I just don't answer it.
They tell you to download, they tell you a website and they spell it out and says, go type this in and go to this website. That's the link in the chain of all stuff we detected for years, but that URL to detect is now not in an email message we can read or something. It's being conveyed in a phone conversation. It's really hard to insert ourselves as detectors in the middle of that whole process.
And I think one of the things I'd like to point out is that we've been talking here generally about computers, but now, you know, we have the Internet of Things, and a gazillion devices are on the internet or accessible from the internet that are open to attack. In one of my books, I have a hacker gets into a drug infusion machine in a hospital and ups the dose and kills somebody. That's real stuff. And one of the examples also, we're not just smartphones now are much smarter than computers were 10 years ago. And there's an application where I can spoof a number. I'll spoof Doyle's number and I'll call you, Janet, and you'll see a message coming from Doyle Groves and you open it. All I have to do is get you to open that message and I can now start tracking your phone. I can tell where you are with high accuracy if it's an iPhone or whatever, with less accuracy if it's an old-fashioned cell, but I can track your location very specifically. And all you've done is open an email message, open a text message from somebody you trust. You think it's from somebody you trust, but we can spoof numbers, no problem. I'd like to ask Judy something if I can, because I think, Judy, this is all such serious frowny stuff. One of the things I've enjoyed about your writing is you put humor into hacking. Can you say something about that? Because I think it's kind of interesting.
Well, I think anytime you're writing a really serious subject about, technology and hacker and all the bad stuff, you have to insert some humor or it's going to be such a downer. And there's humor to everything. And people, even doing, very serious jobs, joke about stuff. So I think that's just a necessity. And every writer should have some kind of humor, but I think it's particularly important in technology.
So give us an example of, I'm thinking of the short story you wrote about a robotic fish.
Oh yeah. Well, that just kind of came to me. And again, he was funny because he was robotic and yet somehow he was very human. And
But Reverend Josie.
yeah, the fish got into all kinds of trouble. He was forever in trouble. And finally, he kind of broke free and lived in the Caribbean and had a good time. But he went through some really bad stuff, with the sea, not sea serpents, but in the Middle East, in the sea over there. He got into bad trouble and he'd always have to be rescued and they'd come and they'd fix his programming and this and that. But it was by and large a funny story.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't directly respond to you, Janet. The disinformation obviously is a huge, and the other thing that we see going on in from Russia right now is denial of service attacks in the Ukraine and other places. And this means they basically overload networks of computers with traffic so that they can't really do anything. Steve, you want to say something about that? You know a lot about that.
Well, there's acronyms, DOS, denial of service, and DDoS, distributed denial of service. The problem with a lot of this detection is when one kingpin then instructs all of the minions to go attack. And you can't really prevent all of these minions from around the world that are attacking your systems. And as Russ mentioned earlier, those Internet of Things are the ones that have default passwords and never get updated, that are easy for the attackers to take over and use in their attack networks. And so IoT is definitely one of those areas that have caused what's called the Mirai botnet, that have taken down companies because of all the attacks. On the Russia side, it's pretty easy to know that Russia's attacking Ukraine because that's the big thing of the day. It's when it spills over into other companies, other countries, that it becomes a problem. And hopefully those distributed denial of service attack botnets are blocked by your tools and your resources.
Something else Russia does. I'm sorry.
No, you go.
Just quickly, one of the things that they do in cases like this, something they've been in dress rehearsal for years. You may recall that starting in 2015, each December, Ukraine experienced a power outage, blackouts on December 21st for maybe a few days, caused by Russia, again, as dress rehearsal for, we can turn this off if we want. They did it in December then and a few more Decembers in a row, just perfecting the tools that they are now poised to unleash on infrastructure. It's not quite Internet of Things, but infrastructure-wise, power grid stuff and water supply stuff are targets that have old technology at the helm. The basic layer of technology there is one that is compromisable. It's true in Ukraine right now. It's true of most other countries of the world. So that's something to consider, is if Russia doesn't like what we do, they could reach out and do something to an adversary far away, and just something to keep in mind and, try to stop them if we can. In the chat, Judy mentioned quickly cyber warfare against Russia. Are we helping Ukraine? She said, I can speak for what our company is doing. We are not part of a broad governmental effort of support, but we do have customers that include nation states and military organizations, and enough customers who are on the ground there where we're helping in that way directly. Maybe Steve can comment on other ways that, the grand help from the outside for Ukraine on the cyber front. What does that look like?
There was actually a non-governmental organization that was attacking Russia called Anonymous, and they just recently found a compromisable system in one of the Russian military organizations, took all of their data and published on the internet of all of the people, their email addresses in the military. So it can be the little guy that helps out in this attack scenario.
Yeah, I was going to mention Anonymous, and they, the way I learned about what Anonymous was doing was through a newsletter that I subscribed to. That any of you who are writing about cybercrime, cyber warfare, and so on, I highly recommend that you subscribe.
Sure, we're
And
trying.
it's free to Cybercrime.
Sure, we're trying.
I mean,
classified. I mean,
God, I got the name of the newsletter wrong. Doyle, help me out.
Of Cyberwire?
Cyberwire. Thank you.
Yeah.
Cyberwire. And it comes out, there are daily versions. And by the way, Proofpoint was mentioned in Cyberwire a couple days ago. Don't know if you saw that, but Cyberwire covers the cyber territory worldwide. And they're looking at Russia, North Korea, and all this stuff. But if you want to really know what's going on in the end, you can subscribe to this for free. If you don't want to get it every day, which I do, there's a weekly version. You can get a summary once a week. But it's been one of the most helpful things that I do as an author, because Doyle and Steve will tell you that I'll come to a breakfast meeting and I'll say, saw this on Cyberwire, tell me what's going on. And I want to work this into my plot. So it's a helpful tool for people who want to fold their fiction in cybercrime into their fiction.
I guess my question is, particularly for Russ and Judy, is it even possible to write a contemporary thriller without some cyber element? Is it credible? I mean,
no.
since it's such a part of our lives.
Well, that's right. It's part of our lives. And, my book is set in two periods, and one is in 2019. And I can't avoid technology. You absolutely cannot. And you can't avoid, the heroine is trying to avoid being stalked by an ex-boyfriend. And, boy, that's very difficult. And there's a lot of bad things that can happen, and she's trying to forestall them. But so I don't think that you can write any kind of, serious book without technology that's set in the present day. I just don't think it's possible, unless you've got some anti-tech person who just refuses to, have a phone or do anything.
I agree with that totally. I think anybody who tries to write a thriller these days without the cyber aspect included is sort of they have their head in the sand. Even just the amount of organized crime, even that is carried on over the dark net, the black networks. Some people have said that almost a majority of financial transactions right now worldwide are basically illegal and going over the dark net. Think about that. It's incredible. And I'm folding human trafficking, sex trafficking into the book I'm working on now particularly, and that is infused also with high tech and cyber aspects. The whole human trafficking industry, if you will, has risen up to be in the top 10 of all industry worldwide.
Wow. We have another question, kind of going back. A couple of you were talking about Anonymous, and Pamela has a question. Her question is, Anonymous has been working independently as gray hats for decades, haven't they? And if you guys could anybody who knows could provide a little more insight into that, answer that question.
Yeah, at least in the financial services industry, they've been around for quite a few years. They've got sections of Anonymous. One's Op Anonymous, Op Icarus. They basically I think, started, among other things, the spring event in Egypt, in the Middle East, where they're basically, they have not, a solid nation state motivation. They're really out there just to, attack bad behavior by countries and companies. That motivation thing that we see at a really high level is, on the nation state side, North Korea just needs money. They're employing hackers to find ways to break into systems to get money. Ransomware is one of their key triggers. Russia has two different sides. They have a nation state that's only interested in chaos and disinformation. And then they have the mob side that's, again, interested in money and use ransomware as their techniques. China, they're interested in personnel information, and they're interested in company intellectual property. On the personal information side, they made big attacks into the OPM, the Office of Personnel Management, to get all of the people with trusted security clearances, like Russ and myself. Our information's in China's hands. On the intellectual property side, we've known that for years. They're out there to attack and find the quick way to make products cheaper. That's what we're seeing. Russ is really into the mob side. He can maybe explain a little bit more about why he likes Eastern European mobs.
I don't necessarily, well, I like to include them. They're great for plot lines because the Armenians and Eastern Europe, and in fact, Doyle may be able to add to this too, Belarus and places like that, and Romania. So you're going to see, you see in the Three-Legged Assassin that I just published, a Romanian organized crime effort in the sex trafficking area, and how the Romanian organized crime is trying to filter into the northern part of the United States from Canada. And all that is real. Canada released its visa requirements on Romania. Romanian organized crime followed the flood of Romanians into Canada. And believe it or not, yes, the Romanian organized crime organization is trying to move into places like Chicago, Detroit, and Boston. And so it's a fascinating picture to look at as I write, because I'm writing on the human trafficking area anyway. But organized crime is heavily into that, as they are into almost anything that you can earn a buck with illegally.
That's really interesting. We had another question.
Go ahead.
Oh,
Please.
go ahead, Doyle. You go.
Really quickly, Steve mentioned the distinction between how China behaves motivation-wise versus some other countries. Instead of chaos, yes, China just wants to get the most basic information about people, to build dossiers on people of the world. That's how they build foundational knowledge and go from there. Quick note about TikTok. TikTok was an app created in China by the Chinese government for which to put it out amongst the people, and hopefully they will just innocently use it and do what they do, which is sharing funny videos. What could be more fun and innocent? TikTok has taken over in raw traffic levels. They unseated Google as the #1 traffic to site. Google was in that spot for 20 plus years. And that tells you something about, they went from nothing to displacing Google in a couple of years. It tells you about how exciting of a product that is. But the point of that product is not the fun and frivolity at the surface. It is just letting people carry around their cell phone and gather stuff about it and send stuff back through TikTok to the mothership that's overseas. That may be a little heavy-handed, but that's what's going on. Just
what can they do about with information about little old me? Or, well, maybe you and Russ and that might be a little different, but I don't have a security clearance. I'm doing a little more than being semi-retired, writing and teaching one class. So what can they do with that?
Who do you know? Who do you communicate with? It's a path from you to somewhere else. What information do you know? What's in your bank account? they're interested in all of that.
You as an individual, you're right, might not be that interesting, but millions upon millions.
Well, wait a minute. I won't go there.
I
don't wanna
didn't
go
want
that
to.
far.
That came out wrong. I didn't mean that at all. What I meant was, you're much more interesting when you're combined with and overlapped with the behaviors of everybody else. You have these friends, these people over here have these same friends. That now puts you in a group of association that there's so many ways that could go just by understanding what they could do. They've built a feedback mechanism so they can do stuff and then watch how the world reacts, watch how they move through physical space, watch who they talk to and what they say with each other. It's just endless what could be done with that kind of foundational start.
Well, here's another question that probably really gets back to some information that a lot of our members want. Carol has asked this question. What can we do as mystery crime writers to inform our readers about these issues as well as entertain them? Especially if, like me, not really up to the cutting edge jargon on cyber practices and the whole field. So what can we do as writers? And Judy and Russ can come to this question from how they've tackled it, and would really like to hear some suggestions from Doyle and Steve. Judy, let's start with you.
Okay, well, in my very last book, Murder in the North Woods, I think I gave some examples on maybe how easy it really is to hack into a network and find out what you need to know there, which most people are not aware of. And I had hackers, good guys and bad guys, and they were both doing that. And let's see, what else? I mean, disinformation, is everywhere, and I think writers should let people know about that misinformation and disinformation, and all of the ways that you can run afoul in your computer online of trouble.
Yeah, where your characters could get into trouble because they believe misinformation. They get into trouble because they may get caught hacking, by the way. Judy, I know in Murder in the North Woods, the hacking sort of went several directions. It wasn't just all bad guys and bad people.
No, the good guy hacked into everything too.
Yeah. And that's something I think perhaps writers should pay attention to.
Like the white hat hackers.
Yeah, and we talked about white hats, black hats, and gray hats. And I think you need to have some hats of each color and not present everybody as a black hat hacker.
Right, because everybody isn't.
Steve mentioned in the chat, echoing Russ's idea to follow Cyberwire, for everybody to have some basic bit of reading that helps get you familiar with what are contemporary issues, and then to have a few ideas about what you want to do. Not that everybody can do this easily, but do what Ross Carley did, which was assemble yourself a few people that are friends in the industry that you can bounce these ideas off of. I know that's not easier. That's easier said than done. However, for this group right here, I don't want to speak for Steve, but as you go out and ideate on this, what's possible in this, to run it, you're welcome to email me at any time and say, yeah, how plausible is this? And get a few comments back from people like that, whether it's us or others that that might be in the industry. That's just a common tenet of good research, to do some due diligence on anything. To have another person say, yeah, that could work, or no, that's trite, and everybody rolls their eyes at that in the industry or something like that. To get that tested early will help you, solidify the right kind of technology that's put into a storyline that's realistic and modern and contemporary.
That's good.
Any thoughts, Steve?
Yeah.
And any additional thoughts?
No, I don't think so. I love reading. I love helping Russ. So the combination there has been a fabulous experience on my side, not including the fact that he named a character after me in the book. So that helps.
Well, hey, you need to know that Janet Williams is in The Three-Legged Assassin too.
Oh, I didn't. I guess I definitely have to read it, don't I?
It's you're a reporter for the Chicago Tribune.
Thanks for the promotion. Yeah, if some folks are asking for addresses of anybody, if you feel comfortable dropping it in the chat, that would be great. Just a couple more things. A little bit earlier, non-fungible tokens. Does that play into anything that we're talking about? A lot of us don't have a real understanding of what they are. Is that kind of part of this world that we're talking about, the cyber world?
Not the NFTs specifically, but cryptocurrency, definitely. Cryptocurrency is the vehicle that has enabled ransomware to thrive in the new world, because to put bigger ransoms on bigger targets, in the old days, you could only get so big to where they're going to find you somehow. They're going to ambush you in the park when you do the drop, all that kind of classic stuff. But cryptocurrency provides a path of nearly true and perfect invisibility. Again, that the NFTs are an extension of that I can tell you nothing about, but cryptocurrency itself is a conduit of major concern.
Yeah, on the crypto side, as Doyle said, companies around the world have spent the last few years figuring out how they can quickly get to Bitcoin. When they get ransomed, they can pay them off quick. You've got external lawyers and everybody else figuring out how to get you Bitcoin. That is definitely the currency of the dark web on our side. My personal opinion, and you guys can take this with a bucket of salt, is avoid NFTs like the plague. They're even less valuable and less interesting for those of us that live normal lives than cryptocurrencies.
Yeah, I'll mention cryptocurrencies in the Three-Legged Assassin and my other books. My assassin gets paid in cryptocurrency, and ransom on kidnapping. Their kidnapping victims, the ransoms get paid in cryptocurrency. There are no dollars changing hands.
Just we're gonna we're hitting the 1 o'clock 1 o'clock hour. Just an observation and a question from Pamela again, that the Russians, the North Koreans, and a lot of organized crime folks are looking at immediate short-term interest, but China plays a much longer game. Yes or no to that, and how does their actions affect our response?
Well, I'm going to jump in very briefly and just say China targets intellectual property and people. Russia targets organizations. And I don't know, it's a longer or a shorter game. It's just a different game in my perspective.
I think it's longer. I think they're going after identifying every person and understanding the core function of that person so that they can leverage them in some point in the future.
Yeah, agreed with China and the long view of things. They've built a edition of their own their own population is in this database that's unprecedented in its detail. They've done that for China. They want to do that for the rest of the world. And what that looks like, there's not much to do in the short term. The others who are doing chaos right now, there's something to do about that. That's hitting this, let's go after that. It's much more visible. So that's the difference in response based on those two behaviors, I think.
Can I ask a question? This is Steve Terrell.
Yeah,
sure. We've talked about Russia and China and North Korea, and of course, we're always wearing the white hats. But is the United States doing something equivalent to that, or what is the United States doing from a standpoint of a nation with regard to being able, if it chooses, to use cyber warfare or whatever, or shut down people? Do we have that capability? Are we doing that? Are we gathering that type of information on our adversaries, or is that something that you would have to kill me if you tell me?
Yeah, that was going to be my answer. The short answer is yes, and if I tell you, I'd have to kill you. But we do have documented evidence that did occur. If you look at Stuxnet, the US and Israel basically planted malware in the the Iranian nuclear facility to take out their centrifuges. and it delayed their development of their nuclear program by years based on that malware that was put on their devices. So yes, and we have had instances of US developed malware being outed by a group called the Shadow Group that released a whole bunch of held intellectual property of the US government to attack other systems. So yes, that is happening. Are they doing it right now with Russia and helping protect Ukraine? It's hard to tell. We haven't seen anything come out of that on the threat intelligence side, but you got to know that they're ready and possibly willing to do that.
I guess sort of as a follow-up, we hear a lot about the Russian bot farms, the hackers, the hacking farms. There's a lot of detail about it, I think, in one of Bernstein's books that I read. Not Bernstein, Woodward, the other one. For those of us who go back to All the President's Men and all that. But is the perception that the US is behind those things that we're hearing about so much in news, or is the perception is that we're just much more quiet about it, but that we are technologically ahead of Russia and China and North Korea?
That
My
kind of
personal opinion is
just
that we're ahead, but we have a much more limited target space and much more restraint on using it unless absolutely necessary and approved by the President of the United States.
Well, that was going to lead me to a question: is who does it the best? Who does this? Who's the best armed, the best equipped in cyber warfare?
Don't know.
4 countries that we've talked about. It's us, and then between Russia, China, and North Korea, the others have their motivations that are maybe dark. I don't want to frame it so obviously there's good and evil, because we're all, on the offense and on the defense. But those are the ones who are really good at it. And just one quick comment about the recent momentum loss from the last administration, specifically to be prepared to fight Russia on stuff. The last administration specifically stood down some of that effort, and the leadership was in transition and a bit of chaos there. I think we lost some ability in just that 4 years of there being a different relationship at the top between our leaders that caused us to lose a little bit of momentum and capability and expertise and everything that I hope is something we can recover from and is back now. Maybe Steve has a thought on that too.
Steve?
No, I don't have anything else on that.
Anybody else have questions?
I saw one in the chat on TikTok. Did you see that, Janet?
Yeah.
I think the mystery plot would be for a country to do just that. Let's invent a new app and let's put it in the hands of the people and make it so awesome that they're using it for fun and they don't know that something nefarious is happening underneath. It's a good kind of template for a story, but it's something that has some reality in how TikTok has
basically TikTok is harvesting huge amounts of information from everybody who uses it.
Oh, Sisters in Crime actually had lessons in TikTok sometime last summer, how to do it. And I was not interested really in having a TikTok, it's kind of seems juvenile, but probably some other people might have, and that totally clueless as to, this is somewhat of a nefarious organization.
Yeah, so from my perspective, Russia or China has everybody's digital identity. Now, thanks to TikTok, they have their facial mapping associated with the digital identity. So they know who you are and they can see who you are as well, coordinated.
Reminds.
I just wanted, wait, I wanted to ask really quick, is there a way for us to erase ourselves?
Good question.
Like
In Europe, there are very progressive laws that give you the so-called right to right to delete yourself, I'm not phrasing it right, but the right to be forgotten is very much baked into the code of how individual people are treated in Europe first. There's a GDPR is the standard that's been established there first. US and California and Illinois have some early efforts at trying to do the same thing. But until that is fully baked, that is imagined, but not fully accessible to us as citizens here yet. But important to do so. There's a privacy consideration that lets that be carried out.
Yeah, but on the hacker side, there's not that official form to fill out to ask the hackers to remove your data.
I was going to say, this reminds me for those of us here in Indiana, years ago, there used to be a great commercial for the Indiana Pacers, and it showed Reggie Miller sitting there and talking, and sitting next to him was Dale Davis, who was the big, muscular power forward for the Pacers. And at the time, Reggie said something like, if you're not attending the Pacers games, my friend Dale Davis has something to say to you. There you go. And Dale Davis looks at the camera, and he's sitting there, and he's got a phone book. He's looking through it, and he just looks up at the camera and he says, I know where you live. That was it. And that sort of reminds me of what it sounds like TikTok is doing.
Yeah, well, Hawthorne mentioned this in a couple of tweets, noting that a couple of websites have been difficult to access, like Google and Amazon. Yahoo's been a little wonky, and actually, since the invasion, I don't know if it has anything to do with the invasion. I've noticed that too, like slower, wonkier to get into some of the, kind of standard accounts that I have. Could that be like kind of residual effect of, what's going on, or just a big fat coincidence?
I have to say the latter at the moment. I'm not aware of anything specific to that, but I could be unaware of something for sure.
I haven't had any issues.
From my side, we watch closely what's called the Down Detector. It's a service that basically monitors all big name companies to see if their internet presence is up or down. I don't see any major issues going on across the world, and certainly Amazon's not really sticking out as an example. FanDuel, maybe there's a big game coming up, seems to have some issues, but that could just be overuse.
Yeah, there was another question here about personal information and data mining. Are any of these sources getting access to DNA testing? A lot of us have submitted DNA test to organizations like Ancestry or 23andMe. Have we pretty much blown it by putting that kind of data out there?
I'm not aware of any, but the fact that it exists and anything is possible, there is a risk. It's not zero. I'm not sure how much it is, but that's enough to where some people are just, to opt out of it is the only way to guarantee that there's no risk that could end up in hands where you don't want it, I suppose.
Oh,
But it's interesting. I went ahead and did it. It's fun.
It sometimes goes back to old-fashioned ways too. I just saw a news article popped up that France has seized a Russian cargo vessel in the English Channel.
Good.
Yeah, in person, physically sees it. Yeah. What other questions or comments or observations, or what questions you guys have? What would you like to hear from our cyber experts?
I just have one comment, which is that as good as the program at VoucherCon was, this is even better. It's one of the best, if not the best program I think that we've had at Sisters in Crime since I've been a member. It's just been outstanding.
I just want to thank Judy, Doyle, Steve, and Russ, thank you so much for pulling this together. I've got pages, I've been taking notes here. So if I was missing a few of the comments online, I was just jotting notes because there are so many ideas here. And I really, we all really appreciate your time and your sharing, just so informational. And yeah, we'll probably using cyber things a lot more as we go forward. Anything else? Otherwise, we'll just wrap this up now. You got any of you want to add anything to what we've discussed?
Well, I assume that this is gonna go up on our YouTube channel.
Goes on our website at least. We
Okay.
publish on our YouTube channel. I mean, our programs are on our website.
No, I think the programs are on the YouTube channel and but we'll have a link to it on the website.
Okay, yeah,
It also gets embedded onto the website. It gets a video embedded. But yes, it goes onto the YouTube
Oh, I did not
Great.
know that.
first. Yeah. It goes there first and then we share it onto the website.
great. Well, thank you very much. We'll be wrapping this up now. Appreciate it.
Enjoyed it from my side. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
good
you.
luck- Good luck with your
Thank you for
stories.
having
There's
us.
A lot of real stories. To have the nonfiction stories, to have the fiction stories come from this too is really interesting. So good luck.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. That was a great program.
Bye-bye.
Bye.